You guys are awesome. This is the kind of stuff that I enjoy testing out. Thank you guys for suggesting this. Let's get into the video. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you for checking my channel and welcome to today's video. Today's video is actually inspired by AS, who left me a comment on my build guide going over a Frenzy Barb using Berserker Axes to be able to run Uber Tristram and gave me a rundown of a build that I should try out. At the time of recording this, I haven't actually tried out the build yet. I finally just got the last of the pieces put on my character, and I'm going to take this through Uber Tristram and compare it to how this performs comparatively speaking to using Berserker Axes from the last build guide I did, or even just my more preferable Phase Blade setup with Grief and Last Wish. But I wanted to go into this run completely blind, so that way I have an unbiased and more of a fair criticism at the end, comparing it to how it actually performs now compared to the other builds that I've done. From this point forward, when relevant, I'm going to go ahead and read out their comment so that way you guys can see exactly what they wanted me to change, comparatively speaking to that particular build guide they commented on to what they're suggesting for this particular build. And when it comes to the other items that they didn't discuss, that I'm assuming is just left up to interpretation as I see fit for this build. I'm going to try to leave it as unchanged as possible with only maybe a few different tweaks here and there depending on the actual demand of this build. But again, I'm going to just simply change the things that they want me to change for this build guide comparatively speaking to my last one, with everything else as untouched as I can leave it. They described it as more of a budgeted version of the build I showed in the video, and it seems to have focused more on being able to slow the Ubers down to a crawl, or potentially even slower than that to make them nearly harmless, while still being effective with damage, utilizing my Mercenary not just for the crowd control, but to actually attack alongside my Barbarian. They also mentioned that this is centered around the theoretical hardcore character that is very tough to die. For the attributes, AS didn't mention any changes that needed to be made, so I just switched the stats back to how my Phase Blade Barbarian had his attribute points distributed. However, I did accommodate for the new weapons and boosted my strength and dexterity up for when I switched to using Duress and Tristram that has no added strength like Enigma has. I do play softcore single player offline, so if any of you guys want to know how to get unlimited and free respecs in your game, make sure to click the card in the corner up above for my previous made video going over the ins and outs of how to do so. It's only a few clicks, and it makes it to where if any of you guys want to try out builds for yourself, you can do so again for free and as many times as you want. For the skill trees, again, I wasn't told to switch things up, so I kept the trees as they were. For War Cries, I maxed Howl for crowd control and Battle Orders to boost our health and my mana. For combat masteries, I maxed Sword Mastery and 1 point to increase speed and natural resistance. For the combat skills, we are a Frenzy Barbarian build, so I maxed Frenzy and put the remaining points into Double Swing. Moving on to the gear, this is where the real changes came from in AS's comment. He is dual wielding up to Cranky Vomirs to be able to slow down enemies with 20% DR and some minus defense per hit. They also mentioned using Eternity in a non-eth base. At first I was wondering, why did they want me to use a non-ethereal base if this Runework comes with an indestructible mod? But then finally I started thinking the fact that the revive charges would be able to actually be recharged, comparatively speaking to using an ethereal base where you wouldn't be able to do so. But they also mentioned how useful it is for the Cannot Be Frozen, slows target 33%, and 20% crushing blow to pair with G-Face and Gore Riders. So for this video, because they talked about using two different weapon sets, I'm going to go into the minis using the Cranky Vomirs, and then when it comes to Uber Tristram, I'll switch to using Eternity because it has the revive charges, and I'll see if I can find some Erdars from either the River Flame or the Durance of Hate, wherever I can find them, and if there are any, I'll use it. If not, I'll just move on and do Uber Tristram. For the remaining items on this build, I'm going to be keeping them all the same as I did when it came to going through my Frenzy Barb guide, going through the Ubers. Moving on to the Mercenary, AS said to use an Eth-upped Cold Steel Eye with an Am Rune in it. Unfortunately, I don't have an ethereal version, but I did up this one to be able to at least keep it consistent with the rest of the reasons they would want me to use it. This should be able to help slow monsters down, aside from using Lawbringer as well, for its chance to be able to cast Decrepify, and the Sanctuary Aura for crowd control when it comes to fighting demons. For the headwear, they gave me a choice of being able to either use Blackhorn's Face for the slows target down mod, and to socket it with a Cham Rune for Cannot Be Frozen. Otherwise to be able to use Kira's. And because there's already a lot of slows target down across my Barbarian and my Merc combined, he is going to use Kira's to be able to keep him from being frozen. The armor is Treachery for the IAS, Fade proc, and Hit Recovery, which will pair well with the Hit Recovery on Kira's. Now that we've gone through the attributes, the skill tree, and the gear for my Barbarian and my Mercenary, let's go ahead and test this out to see how well it does running through the Ubers to collect the torch. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Hello.
Yes?
Good afternoon.
You're too late. My brothers will not have died in vain.
Impossible. I can't.
Alright, now that I'm done running Uber Tristram, let's talk about the build and kind of compare it to the build that they commented on to be able to speak on the good, the bad, and just give my overall thoughts. Now, for the good things about this build, one of the things that was really nice is it's a very different build, and it's a really good segue into going into more Uber budget type of builds that I actually am not familiar with and just want to get back into, because I've done some budget Uber builds for the Frenzy Barb before and even a Smiter, but this was nice to be able to kind of get back into a build that is not very high end as far as having such endgame type of gear. And it was really cool to be able to see the Ubers slowed down to pretty much a crawl, just like they explained in their comment. It was really fun to be able to have that as far as a safety net when it comes to survivability, with them being able to have their animations slowed and not really doing much damage, if any at all, at certain times. And it was really, really cool to just kind of still have a good runtime when it comes to Uber Tristram, not something like, for example, when I did my one item summon Necromancer through Ubers, it took hours to be able to get through. This was simply just maybe about 10-15 minutes. So it was still in the realm of being a good time when it comes to a more budgeted character, because that's what they labeled it as a budgeted character, not something that is a budget, but just compared to the build they commented on. Now, some of the things that I personally were not favoring for this build is when it comes to survivability, I am personally just used to using something with life tap on it to be able to supplement my health. And with this build, you were not able to do so because you had to have the Lawbringer on the Mercenary from what they described, which means that you would have either life tap overriding your Decrepify or vice versa. So for this build, maybe you would have life tap go off and you can get one hit to start getting back some of your health, but if it was in a very critical moment that you really need a lot of health back, if your Decrepify was to override your life tap, if you were to use something like Marowak Boots, or if you had a Last Wish or whatever you would be able to use for life tap, this would be a really difficult build to be able to balance out, because you never know when it's actually going to proc for one or the other. But also too, the idea that this was not a very easy build when it comes to having a lot of damage. Yes, you do have quite a bit of crushing blow, you have open wounds, you have deadly strike, but when it comes to not having Decrepify be used from your Mercenary, this was a really hard build to be able to actually have quite a bit of damage, and it almost seemed like you had to really rely on the Decrepify to go off to be able to actually start really knocking down the health of everyone that you're fighting, which was a little bit of an issue because for certain fights it didn't go off soon enough, at least again in my opinion. Again, this is just me nitpicking, this is not against AS at all. I'm thankful that they sent me the criteria for what they have for the build. But as far as the slowdown mechanic, you are sacrificing quite a bit of damage to be able to slow things down. And with the fact that Crushing Blow has a diminishing return just like Magic Find, once it starts to get to about the halfway point of whoever you're fighting, it's going to start to do less and less for the actual health of whomever you're fighting, especially the two that I questioned, which was Lilith and Mephisto. I died at Mephisto once, but then again, who hasn't died at Mephisto? And I kind of just expected it because even with the ability to slow him down, his Conviction Aura is going to be a huge issue, and if he gets enough minions around us, we're going to be swarmed and would be easy to kill. Thankfully, it only happened once, but again, this was a really cool build to be able to try out. Again, it's a nice transition into something more budgeted or even just a budget character overall, which again, I want to get back into. But as far as a playstyle that I'm going to continue to play, I actually am thinking about tweaking this a little bit and maybe having some items swapped around here and there to be able to make this easier as far as survivability and to really kind of complement the slowdown and do more damage. So that way, this is still going to be a really nice runner when it comes to Uber Tristram. But as far as this build overall, this kind of playstyle is personally not for me. I'm just used to playing a Barbarian that does a lot more damage, but that's just, again, my playstyle and my preference. But again, I want to thank AS for sending me the criteria of this build. It is really appreciated. Even if this wasn't to be made into a video, it was really fun to be able to try out and to be able to see what it is that you like to play or what you would be able to actually run through Uber Tristram. And if anybody else has anything that they want me to try out, please let me know in the comment section below. It doesn't have to be budget, it doesn't have to be endgame, it could just be something as far as a concept of what you think is going to be fun to try out. I would love to be able to see what you guys are actually running when it comes to your characters, whether it be on single player, offline, or ladder. Even if it doesn't make it into a video, I can make this into a series. I've been thinking about it if you guys were to give me more suggestions. But even if not, this again was something fun to be able to try out and to just expand my ideas on what actually would be viable to be able to take into different aspects of the game. But with this one, it'd be Uber Tristram. And that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and were able to see how well this build does when it comes to going through Uber Tristram. It is a very viable build. Don't make the mistake that I did. I actually forgot to mention this when it comes to my criticism of the actual run. I originally played this on player 7, completely forgot that when I was actually working on another video, I had my character up to a much higher level, and then when it came to doing this, I did not switch back to player's command to having it on player's 1, so I ended up actually fighting all the way to Uber Tristram on player 7, and then just kept dying. And it was such a huge issue for me. I finally went and looked at the player setting, and it was at player 7, switched back to player's 1, and then this run became much easier by comparison. So don't make the mistake that I did. Definitely go ahead and get this build a try, and make sure you're on players 1 because you're not going to have any better luck when it comes to the roll of the torch on players 1 comparatively speaking to player 7 or 8. It's going to have all the same RNG odds regardless. If you like this kind of content and want to see more, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification to be notified whenever a new video comes out.
Come on. Come on. Come on, then. There you are. There you are.
And if you enjoyed this video, please let me know by leaving a like. It really is appreciated to be able to help my channel to grow. And if you want to watch more of my Diablo 2 Resurrected content, there's going to be a card in the corner up above for you guys to go check out. There's already a lot of content in the playlist that you'll see with a lot more coming in the very near future. Other than that, hope you're all staying safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.